Welcome to the datacenterHawk podcast. Today we're talking Q1 2021 highlights across North America, Europe, and even a little bit of Asia. And if you stick around to the very end, we're going to have some CrossFit talk. Okay, David, today we're talking Q1 2021 highlights. So let's start with headlines. Give me like your top takeaways from the quarter.
Yes. Well, probably the biggest one is just that, there was, I would say, consistent demand. We came out, 2020 was one of the largest growth periods in the data center industry's history. And it's a relatively young industry, but still, we now have, a decade of really good growth data. And so if you're like me, you're wondering, hey, out of like the biggest year ever, what's going to happen in that first time period. And so I think the first thing we realized was that, the hyperscale users that are continuing to expand, not just here in the US, but in Europe and Asia, that is continuing. And it ebbs and flows. So, I think this period was a little less than the last period as it relates to hyperscale demand, but certainly still out there. That's the first thing, Mike. You asked for a few things. I'm going to give you a few.
Yeah, multiple, plural things. Thank you.
The second thing that I think most companies would agree, and this can be market by market, but I think it's holistic, is enterprise demand that we really categorize between like 100 kW, like if you think about sizes of transactions, 100 kW to like 2 megawatts. When COVID hit, it really went quiet. And we've seen that kind of come back. So there's, I would say, more RFPs in the market for requirements that are in that size range. And, and so I think so both of those very encouraging signs for, this first part of the year and then the rest of the year moving forward.
Yeah, I think back in maybe end of the year, you talked about, what will the first half of 2021 look like? And I think you said you thought likely to see the same demand we saw in 2020. I mean, 2020 was like,
Yeah.
Do you think that's more or less continued? Slightly down, but not like off a cliff?
Yes. Yeah.
So you were right is what you were saying?
Pretty much.
Okay.
Well, you were saying it, but I'll say it too.
Yeah,
I was
sure.
right. No,
I think iterated it, then you can reiterate it. Your rightness.
The biggest mistake people can make in our space is looking at the highs and lows of the demand and feeling like there's like major shifts happening, because we are in an environment where you have 10 global buyers that are buying significant amounts. The numbers can be, significantly different, like quarter to quarter, year to year. And so I think you just have to look at things holistically. It doesn't feel like those companies are slowing down at all. It seems like they're expanding their footprint, and then they grow into it, and then they start expanding again. And I think we're in one of those expansion phases.
Yeah, I like to think of it. Yeah, it doesn't follow the same analog as like a manufactured good, where the growth is somewhat more steady.
Correct.
Where we, again, put everything into that box you're familiar with. Okay. All right, let's talk about some highlights across the different geographies. So, tease, we are now tracking some of the APAC markets.
Ayo.
We're not going to talk about them in great detail because we're quite frankly still getting familiar with them. But they are coming, and you may sprinkle in some APAC nuggets as we go along, as you are wont to do. All right, so let's talk about North America. There's a couple of markets that stood out as far as some interesting things happening. So let's talk about Northern Virginia to start. Again, always largest data center market in the world. Plenty going on there as always, but what stood out specifically about this quarter?
The demand was reasonable to moderate to strong. I think the market, continues to grow because those hyperscale companies are wanting to mature footprints. The connectivity story is so good there. And also, too, the companies that have built, significant size portfolios there, like if you're going to move, there's additional costs from a network perspective. So a lot of times it's just easier to expand and grow. So that's part of it. If you look at Northern Virginia, kind of in the big picture, there's different sub-markets within that market as a whole. And we have seen growth taking place in areas like Manassas, which is south of Ashburn. Ashburn is like the capital of everything going on there. Wrong term, capital with DC. Ashburn is Maine and Maine. That is where the majority of the data center footprint is in Northern Virginia. But then you go south to Manassas, there's activity taking place in Leesburg. There's even stuff going on in like Gainesville. And so starting to see different geographies emerge.
Can I get a Virginia Beach out of you?
There's stuff happening there, but it's
there is
a little different. But
things
that have to do with subsea cables. And
yes.
So that, really when I think about Northern Virginia, it is, how much those big users want to grow. And they certainly did in, the first quarter.
All right. Let's talk about next about Phoenix, a market that is
interesting.
Yeah. And for different reasons. So talk a little bit about what's been happening there recently, specifically in this past quarter, and how that fits into the context of it, that market as a whole.
Yeah. Phoenix is divided, in my mind, into 5 different areas. You've got kind of the center core of Phoenix. That's where the Carrier Hotel is downtown. You have Chandler, which is south of that, which you've seen for the last 5 years, a ton of data center activity, development activity in that market. Move out to Mesa, and there's interesting things happening out there. Move north of downtown. There's a couple of providers there. And then you move west over into Goodyear. And
where the 5 areas meet, all the operators come and fight it out in a big gang war to determine who gets the
Fight
deals.
Club. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like gangs in New York.
Yeah, exactly.
That's 5 points.
So anyway, that's how, Phoenix is split up. And the advantage that you have in Phoenix is you've got reasonable costs. You have really good competitive market. So, the data center industry's top providers are there and have significant footprint to grow. And you have just that ability to scale over time. So, there's other markets that have similar characteristics but haven't been the market hasn't been validated by the big cloud providers that are there. Phoenix is one of those that has. So the big 5 cloud providers all have sites there that they own and operate themselves and are leasing significant amounts as well. And so that's what you're seeing in an area like Phoenix. And we'll continue to, I think a lot of people think that market could down the road have the ability to really grow as big as like a Northern Virginia. Obviously this is like years and years and years down the road. But if you look at planned power, so we track planned power at datacenterHawk, like how many planned projects are in a market, and Northern Virginia is the top with the most. The second, I believe, is Phoenix. That's top of my head, but I'm almost positive.
Yeah, and I think that you can see some very accentuated jumps in that specific metric around 2018 and 2019.
Yeah.
And so it makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's kind of, there is plenty of land. It's like a Dallas where there's no geographical limits.
Yes, and if you're going to buy a site, you're buying it with the thoughts of, a 20-year horizon that you can deliver, 100 to 200 megawatts of power. It's not just like, 15, 30 megs. That's where the industry was 10, 15 years ago. It's not where the industry is today. Yeah.
So the preconditions are there. The kindling, the tinder are set in Phoenix for a data center bonfire. No,
yes, there will be some that comment on our podcast about Mike's choice of words that he uses that will really like what you just shared.
That's great.
Taking it back to that.
That's my small
bonfire,
contribution.
Yes.
Thank you. All right, last one's a little bit fun. So I'm going to do a shameless plug. If you've been with us for a while, you can just hit the fast forward button here. But so as most people know, if you come on our site or subscribe. Yeah.
I'm always
yeah. Or you know what? Just sign up.
Yeah.
So if you come on our site, you look at the map of the U.S., there's like 125 plus markets that you'll see listed there.
Yeah.
Of those, there's a subset that we track like on a little bit more in-depth level. We call those our insight markets. We just added a handful of markets this quarter. One of them being Salt Lake City.
Yes.
So it's enough going on there that we kind of promoted it from like JV to varsity. So now it's like, hey, you're gonna get some attention, Salt Lake City. And the timing was really great because talk a little bit about what happened in Salt Lake City. Actually, we added it last quarter.
Yeah.
But what happened this quarter that was interesting in Salt Lake City, and there's also some other just neat dynamics about that market.
Yeah. This market was, has actually there's been a data center footprint there, but not to the scale that we've seen in other places. And over the last 3 years, there's been 2 or 3 different operators that have bought and built in ways similar to some of these other markets we're seeing. Typically, when that happens in different geographies, bigger users find that attractive. And so that's the result of that exact thing is what happened in Salt Lake City this last, quarter, is you've had, those three providers building in a way that is attractive to large users and large footprints. And it's a market that's interesting because it's reasonably priced. It's, considered kind of West Coast, but not exactly on the West Coast. So, you get some of the geography value, but you're not having to pay the freight for being in an area like California, or, it has tax incentive opportunities. So all those things together make Salt Lake a really interesting place. And I would imagine that you'll see a lot of money poured into that area from a data center development standpoint over the next 5 years.
Yeah, and one of the things I'll note is like there's really only 4 kind of multi-tenant data center operators there, and there's like a 5th that's sort of breaking in, Nova. But that I think there's just so much room for growth.
Yeah,
and there's a lot of just some quick stats on that. So right now we just has that market at like 74 megawatts.
Yes,
and just again put that in context. Like Northern Virginia is what, like 1,400 megawatts now.
Sounds right.
Getting that right?
Yep.
Dallas, Chicago, Phoenix, Northern California, like 300 to 400 range. And so, there's plenty of room for growth. And you look at Portland, a city that we've seen, our market that we've seen like double in size in the last 2 years.
Yep.
I think you even said it might double again. We might see that same thing in Salt Lake City.
Yeah. When we started tracking Portland, it was like a 45 megawatt market. Now it's close to 100, just by some of the deals and pre-leasing and supply that's been delivered in that market. So, not far away, but it shares – Salt Lake probably shares some similar characteristics, obviously different market, different state, all that stuff, but similar characteristics for a market like Portland. That's a really good example.
There's some secular tailwinds that are really going to benefit the industry. There's some checks investor buzzwords. Secular tailwinds.
Secular
tailwinds. All right, we'll keep an eye on Salt Lake City.
Yeah, do it.
No, I'm telling you to do it.
Oh, okay.
You're telling our listeners. All right. Let us shift our focus, David, to the continent of Europe.
Okay.
Talk to me about what you're seeing that's of note in Europe.
Our takeaways from a European perspective, decently strong growth period from a demand and absorption standpoint. We've seen a lot of absorption like in 2020 in an area like Frankfurt. First quarter of 2021, London had a really strong growth period, and we also saw a number of like additional projects get announced in London. So the planned power in London actually rose quite a bit across Europe, but of that amount, I think 40% was specifically attributed to projects in London. And I think why that, I always think about when those developments are announced or when the companies are buying sites, what is that telling us about where it typically takes these sites 2 to 5 years to be power to the site, entitled and ready to build on, and then you're delivering the shell and all those things. So it's telling me that over the next 3 years we will see some pretty interesting growth in a market like a London. And some of the other markets that are over there as well. Now we're tracking. You mentioned the U.S. markets that we added. We also added last year, I think, the 8 different secondary markets in Europe, and that seems to be those are areas where there's a lot of interest and growth as well. So, but what stuck out to us this quarter was really what was going on in London.
Yeah. And so you mentioned that added planned capacity, which we would think it signals a lot of optimism.
Yeah.
In the industry.
Yes.
So, but what I think that kind of segues to our next topic of like really some of the challenges we've seen, securing power.
Yeah.
Specifically one of the markets that we heard a lot about was specifically in London, and even more specifically the sub-market of Slough.
Yep.
And just how that it's really squeezed for power.
Yeah.
I think we've been hearing that for a few quarters now, but I think it's becoming more to the fore. Talk a little bit about, some of the challenges you've seen, not just in Slough, but in other markets where, power is becoming an increasingly more difficult thing to procure.
Yeah. When I started in the space, there was kind of the saying that
I love every story that starts with when I started in the space, because it's going to be like,
sure.
tell us more, regale us, please.
No, it's quick. But we would say 2% of the world's energy used data centers use 2%, and over the last 10 years that number has changed from 2 to 5. So, one thing that tells us obviously is that this business has grown quite a bit, and if I think most people in this space don't see it slowing down anytime soon, just based on the way businesses are using IT infrastructure, the way that we as consumers are using our phones and computers, all that stuff. So
consumers be consuming.
Yeah, that's so true. Gosh, that's a shirt or something we need to put on datacenterHawk's website. But I think if you think about, so what that means is that companies have to keep growing and utilizing significant amounts of power in different places all across the world. And if a city or a municipality struggles with like infrastructure maturity, that's going to be a problem, not just to get something done now, but also 3-5 years from now, because typically those companies will grow in those markets. So that's one of the challenges that's happening. But another is just the power companies in certain areas are having a hard time keeping up with the amount of requests for, power growth. Northern California is a good example of this. We see some of this in Silicon Valley with, the amount of projects that are there and the amount of requests that some of the power companies have. And like, can they actually, within a certain time period, serve all those requests? They just can't. So the timelines are, pushed further out. And that's in the U.S. And there's some other markets in the U.S. or sub-markets in the U.S. where some of that's a challenge. And there's reasons people want to be very specifically in, a sub-market because there's maybe network advantages, latency advantages that they have. There might be tax incentive advantages that they have. And so, at some point you're evaluating, okay, well, and there's timing issues too. And so if it's like, well, I can't do it from a time perspective, or me moving out, I know I can put my, whatever the IT load is, 20 miles away, but there's a cost to that. And so that's where these companies are always evaluating. But I think it is interesting that power has, in some markets, has become somewhat of a limiting factor. And, I think this is something that we'll have to wrestle with more and more as the industry grows. Another area that we're having to wrestle with in certain areas is like water usage. And as data centers are, cooled either by air or by water, local governments and supplies of water are taxed or have to figure out how are they going to serve these facilities with water. And so you're seeing a lot of maturity on the design side of things, the efficiency side of things, to get water out of data centers, but there are some that still use it. And so I think this is you bring up a really good point, which is the resources that we have. The data center industry is focused on, hey, how do we do this efficiently so we can use less? But the industry continues to grow exponentially, and with that comes a set of challenges. One of them is being power usage.
Yeah, that calls to mind two different podcasts we've done. One podcast, one panel. You did a panel a year and a half ago on like sale leaseback transaction, and you see a lot of these enterprise data centers are theoretically a 5 or 10 megawatt data center, but they're really only 2 to 3 megawatts full. So they're really like this capacity that could be almost a path of least resistance for a data center operator to come in, do the sale leaseback transaction, and then basically tap into the extra power basically immediately.
Yeah,
that's one. So to check that, we can link to that. It was Raj from Aligned, Jonathan Schildkraut, and Avner.
Yes, I remember that.
It was fun. That was fun. Anyways, the second one was one we did recently with Rob Morris from Skybox, and he said his teams, the amount of time his teams are spending on power procurement has gone up 5x in the last 18 months. So I mean, it's certainly something to keep an eye on, and obviously all the operators are aware of it, but that's just, it's going to be something that's not going away.
Yeah, you got to have a plan.
There's no magic pill for power. It's just, gets brute force.
That is true.
So, yeah, it will be interesting. I think we'll keep an eye on that. It's not something that we track on our site, but obviously capacity is power, but the power challenges are not on there. But something we certainly we'll keep our eye on and keep talking about.
And it all has to do, if you think about the biggest data center users in the world value, their ability to scale power up fast, how quickly you can get to the solution to the market, and flexibility. And so two of the three things are directly related to how quickly can you get the power to the market? And so when that's when there's a question mark around that in certain places, that's going to be something that has to be figured out. And I want to be very clear. I'm not suggesting that there's, some shortage and there's certain data center operators that can't do, what they're aiming to do. I just mean we're seeing in certain areas some challenges that we haven't seen before because the demand has gotten so big. So all that being said, keep your eye on the power issues that maybe are created in areas where there's not enough.
The phrase "follow the money." You've heard that phrase before?
I have.
You are issuing a new phrase now. Follow the power.
Oh man.
Or lack of power.
There you go.
All right, if you stuck with us this far, we love to talk about CrossFit. We have done a disservice. We have received some feedback in the comments of our YouTube channel.
More CrossFit talk?
There's actually less CrossFit. Oh. But you know what? I'm going to kind of dodge that comment.
Hey, just get to the real content,
guys. Just
guys.
get to the data center content, please, guys. But we know there is at least one, maybe even two people that listen to this podcast who love the CrossFit content.
Love it.
If you made it this far, stick with us. We're going to tease this at the beginning so you know it's coming.
That's right.
All right, so we just wrapped up the CrossFit Opens.
I'm still
For those who are not aware, it's an online competition. Anybody can compete. Was 3 weekends. It used to be 5. Now it's 3 weeks of workouts and ended up sneaking in a 4th, but that's not important. And anybody can be sign up. So our gym had a little competition.
That's right.
And, you may well imagine David and I are neck and neck on a lot of these. So let's talk about the workout number 1.
Okay.
And I'm going to describe it, and then you can tell me, you can narrate it.
We have video. Yeah, but we're not going to show it. It's awful.
It was a combination of jump rope, double under movements, and what's called a wall walk, which you basically, like in a push-up position with your feet against the wall, and then you kind of like walk your feet up the wall and walk your hands back to the wall. So at the end of the thing, you're like against the wall, facing the wall with your hands, and then you walk your hands back out. It doesn't sound that hard. It is so brutally hard. So you and I did this on a Friday. You beat me by 1 rep.
Yes.
So we both said, yeah, I'm going to redo it on Monday.
We're going to get a lot more.
We're gonna go. We got a new strategy. I really had time to think about it all weekend, blah, blah, blah. As one of the friends in our say was like, he said, movement-specific muscle adaptation occurs in 48 hours. I don't know if that's true or not, but you and I both go again on Monday. We each exceeded our Friday total by 1 rep. So you maintained your lead. I maintained my deficit. But let's talk about the redo workout. Just take us from the beginning to the end. I think people would love to hear about your experience.
Sure. I'll do this fast, but when you have to redo one of these, it's nasty mentally. So we knew it was going to be not fun. And you had 15 minutes. Was that the cap?
Yeah.
15 minutes anyway.
15 minutes.
So, I think the last section that we kind of broke it up into sections, but the last section that we were in, we
paint
had
the picture for the listeners. You and I are literally right next to each other.
Yeah, so we have
we're more or less kind of rep for rep.
Yes,
sort of.
Yes, absolutely.
You had a judge who was not crediting you with reps. As much as you would have liked.
He was a lot more.
He's a lot more stringent.
He was focused on making sure I was following the rules, which is always good. I need that in my life.
Yeah, you do.
And so I had a few that I had to redo, which was warranted. And I had a few that I failed. That's another thing too. You're up literally, up on the wall, and so if your arm gives out, it's ugly.
Which they did.
And there was a couple of them. There's ugly falls, which was great.
That's
and I actually have a good camera.
Yeah,
yes, I have a good camera angle of me and then Mike's in the background. It's actually really funny. And so I ended up getting 1 rep at the very end, which I had no idea. When you get in it, you have no idea
you're just in the
where
pain
the other person is. And so anyway, at the very end, I got 1 rep more. That actually put me in a very favorable spot in our gym competition. So at the time, after round 1, I was in the money.
Yeah, so the basis, the
top 5
scoring was based on how well you've done in certain benchmarks over the course of the year. So it basically normalized everyone's scoring.
Yeah, so when I was in 5th place, it's like there were definitely people that finished ahead of me in the workout, but because of what you just mentioned,
Yes.
I was ahead of them.
I will credit our gym for designing that competition. It created a lot of drama.
It did.
Like your points could swing a ton just based on how you did
Yeah.
relative to your benchmark.
And after that was the highest I ever was. And then it was
kind of a wear away type of situation.
Yes. And then we did workout 2, which was
workout 2 was dumbbell snatches and burpee box jump overs.
Gosh.
And
I met Jesus in that one.
Yeah, you did it. Had some back issues.
Yep.
I did it. Tried to redo it. And I had my
You
splits all
couldn't
laid
middle.
out. And I said, if I fall behind my
Yes.
splits, I'm just going to
Yeah.
quit. It's not worth it. And I fell behind my splits and quit. So
You beat me by a good minute there.
I'm still unwinding like my right.
Yes, there was some back
from
pain.
that.
If you did this deal, most
You
people
know.
had some back
Yeah,
issues
a lot of people
with
have
it.
back. Not as bad as whenever it was 4 years ago when that was like the first dumbbell workout.
I didn't do it then.
You weren't there. I was there. Yeah. This is your second open.
Yes, and you did. So you beat me in that one, and so we
kind of flip flopped
switched,
in the standings. Yeah.
And then event 3.
Event 3, gosh, this was so great. So again, it was the guys who are super dialed in at our gym really loved this workout. They just said it was like a very devilish test. It was basically you did some front squats, some pull-ups, and some toe to bar and some thrusters, and you rest. It was like a 3 little, and then you did some more work, front squats, pull-ups, thrusters, and then you rest. And then front squats, muscle-ups, thrusters. And then as soon as you finished or got time capped, which was the case for us, you had like 7 minutes to do like this weird like barbell complex.
Weight workout. Yes.
So I was coached to go very easy up until the muscle-ups. And I took that to heart. And even though I was like 2 minutes behind you, I felt like my heart rate was about 406.
Yes.
It was brutal.
Yeah.
And then I was able to catch you and some other guys in our gym on the muscle-up portion of it.
Yes, you did. You caught us, and
it was really a tale of two wads.
It was
the
awful.
best of times, and it was the worst of times.
Yes, but in a different way.
Yeah, and then you had to, do a complex.
Your finish.
So I did finish in the money. I don't know how it happened, but
what have you done with all that money that you won?
Confluence of things. I put a pull-up bar in my house. And maybe I'll win some more money next year. But it's worth knowing the guy who won the competition, anyways, he's probably the fittest guy in our gym. He ended up being like 1,200th in Texas. Like top.
Out of how many do you think? I mean,
I don't know actually where all he ended
he's
up.
Probably
he
in
was
the top 1,000.
He was in the 98th, 99th percentile, which is crazy.
Fit.
He is an animal.
It's fit, Rhett Gill.
So that's great CrossFit Open talk.
It was good.
You watched. So this guy. This is another good anecdote. So there was a top 10% guy go on to the quarterfinals, which is another online competition that you helped him judge. Tell us about the workout and then the aftermath.
So it was a 120. You take a wall ball and you throw it up high, catch it,
wall ball, 100,
and then you do 120 calories on a rower. And these guys, there were 4 of them that did it, and we helped them or helped judge them or whatever. And when they finished, they were in, like anyone, if you do it, you're in the just pain cave of hell. And they just laying down on the ground and kind of flopping around and then coughing a bunch. So, and then we watched it on a Saturday, and then lo and behold, we had to do it on a Monday. So I
skipped it that Monday.
That's smart. That's a smart move right there. Hurt. No, you were hurt. I'm kidding.
Well, the way they do that second part is like you have to do 5 workouts in 3 days.
Yes.
So they really taxed him. I think that was the third or fourth one he had done.
Yes. But it was one of the worst.
Any one of those, I'm probably out for a couple days.
It's one of the worst, I think, because it's just so cardio. I mean, it's
all gas.
Gas and crash.
All gas and crash. Well, it was fun. And I hope
CrossFit.
All the 3 listeners, John Day specifically, that stuck around, you appreciated this. There is, I'm sure there is a CrossFit DC, like a CFDC in District of Columbia. But there should be I thought it'd be fun if there was a CrossFit gym in Ashburn, because it's surely all the people.
Ones. I've been to one.
Oh, you've been to one. But it was CFDC, CrossFit Data Center.
I don't think it's called that. Yes.
Okay. Well,
but it is a good.
It'd be also nice to actually have a CrossFit gym in a data center and just cool that thing way down. Here's another funny story. While we're here, so the same guy that's in our gym, the real fit guy, during the opens, he would come in at like 1:30 when there was no other classes, and he would we were there one morning, and he goes, the guy who owns the gym goes, I just got a Venmo from Devlin. So Devlin would Venmo him money to turn the air way down in the gym
air
so that it could be real cold there when he was doing his workout.
He's already
paying
a
performance bump.
Yes.
No, he wasn't paying it for. He was paying for it.
Sure. It's good.
Oh, anyways, good times. All right. We will catch you guys next time. Hope to produce a lot more pods here in the upcoming weeks and months. But until that next time, we'll see you.